personal, I ain't lying, I ain't hiding, I've been grinding, multiplying. I've been trying to get my weight up, staying prayed up, meditating and taking time away. You always posting up pictures, trying to look like you winning. I'm writing rhymes in the kitchen, soaking in moments we live in, yeah. You got the nerve to be on me, faking your life for the IG. If you got my number, don't add me, cause baby, I'm on hiatus. I'm on hiatus. I'm on hiatus. I'm on hiatus. Baby, don't check for me. Taking time out to be and live my life off screen. Taking time out to be and live my life. Hey. Taking just don't be and live my life. Don't take it personal. We just building. It's my season. Lay foundation. Make a name for generations, please, and make and take a break or a little vacation and chasing blues away. You always posting up pictures, trying to look like you winning. You always be working.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. That was a twitchy couple of moments. Myself and my colleague Mark were having a couple of little technical experiences there to push that sort of song live to you, actually, interestingly. So if you know the name of the song, if you guessed it, stick it in the chat and we'll tell you if you got it correct. I don't think we got a prize for it, but if you know what the song was, let us know. Great to see you. My name's James. We've got a huge amount of content to go through this afternoon. Before we do that, and we'll be into that within a couple of minutes, but before we do that, a couple of critical things for me. First of all, can I just kind of let you know, but also celebrate with you that as of yesterday, we are now fully aware that this course is now not only certificated but accredited as a qualification, and as a recognised CPD provider, the EverLearner Limited could provide you this CPD in teaching Edexcel GCSE Paper 1. The first time anyone's ever actually offered something like that, so we're really, really proud of that. If you're interested in that accreditation, then you need to go to the hub page that I'm going to show you in a second, and you need to go and apply for that accreditation. I'm going to talk to you a bit when we get into the content, but that's how you need to do that. Remember, the course is completely free the first 6 weeks. If you want to do the assessment accreditation, there's a little fee for that for week 7, and we'll talk to you more about that in due course. Before we go any further, I want to quickly show you a couple of things that you need to be aware of. So thing number 1, please be aware that this thing here, if I just zoom in there, this is your hub page, okay? So we're on the hub page here, and if I just sort of scroll you down, in fact, you can actually see that this is kind of live in the background there. That's actually live. I'm not going to put the sound on because you will hear it, but this is the information that you need. Now, a couple of things about the hub page. You can get your printable notes here. You can get your editable notes here if you want to write with your notes online, and you can get onto a live chat down here where you can talk to us. That's basically daytime hours, but if you've got any questions, we can engage with you right there. So that's the first thing. Secondly, imminently, you are going to be getting an email from the website, the EverLearner.com, because for the duration of this course, you are going to be a student on the EverLearner.com, and Mark, my colleague, is literally creating your profile as I speak, and you're going to get an activation email very, very imminently about that. So please be aware of that, okay? Got a lovely message from Mark there. Stream's very clean. Perfect. So have a look. Now, if you don't know what the EverLearner.com is, it's full course Edexcel. It's got everything. If I just go into here and I don't go to lung volumes, for example, it has everything in here that you need to engage with in terms of learning this. Of course, it's typically aimed at students. This is the respiratory stuff that we're not going to focus on today because we're going to talk about structures. But that is your, as it were, possession for the duration of this course. Now, the other thing is that we do our assignments and exams in week 7 through this portal as well. So if you are going to do that, that access is going to be super important for you, okay, guys? So those two things, really, really important for you to be aware of. Now, Before we get sort of flying into this, I make an assumption that you've got your notes pages in front of you. If you haven't, I guess, like a bit of paper will do, but you're going to be scribbling. The notes pages are much sharper for you, okay? So if you're able to use those, please do download them or get the editable version. And secondly, guys, I cannot stress enough again how proud we would be for you to join us for that week 7, that certification and accreditation. There is a caveat to this. We have about 180 people taking Edexcel AQA and OCR, Paper 1 CPD with us this year, all separate courses, by the way. But we're only going to take about 75 through certification. The reason we're doing that is because we want to make sure our feedback quality and scale is of the right nature, okay? If we took 180 of you, our kind of one-to-one work with you would be quite fragile and shallow, so we don't want to do that. We want to keep it nice and high quality and fresh. So go and apply and get yourselves on that. Now, I think, without further ado, I'm going to go and switch the feed, and you're going to have me back imminently talking to you all about course structures for Edexcel GCSE PE Paper 1. What's it called? Fitness and the Body Systems. Here we go. So I think we're about ready. Let's talk a little bit about structures of this course. Well, obviously we're here right now, and we're here on at this specific moment, a sunny Tuesday. It's probably going to get worse in a second, but this is where we are. And obviously we're going to cover these components today. What I would say about today's session is it's really, really detailed in terms of analysis, documentation, volume of kind of quantitative data. It's really significant. So we're going to go through it today. It's going to set us up then for covering each and every content component and skill component of this. So I want to be clear here, guys. Look, this time next week, we are literally going to be covering every word of the musculoskeletal system teaching and learning that goes with Edexcel 1 to 9 PE. Okay, so that is something we are going to do. And I want to be clear here, guys, we are absolutely covering everything. You can judge us by that, and I really want to stress that point. We're going to cover everything. So we're going to go from musculoskeletal. I don't know if you've noticed here, but we've actually done a little switcheroo in the specification. This would come below here, and this would come above here, but we think mechanics and movement fits neatly after musculoskeletal, so just be aware of that. And then basically we're into all of the predictable stuff about health, fitness training, fitness testing, etc, 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 warm up and cool down injury to finish off with. Now I want to stress the point about week 7. Okay, in here, week 7 is utterly optional for you. You absolutely do not need to do it, but it's something you should seriously consider. And we are in a situation where that is going to, well, I'd say exactly it's going to work. If you do week 7, you'll be set an exam through Exam Simulator. Exam Simulator is our in-house exam software containing literally hundreds of exam questions for Edexcel GCSE PE, and you guys will sit effectively like a paper 1, let's call it a mock or a practice exam. And the idea of this is that it really gives you that full experience of what the student's going to have in this particular qualification. And more importantly, this is not a model where we are purely assessing you. We are going to set you that piece of writing or those pieces of writing. You're going to answer those pieces of writing, and then what's going to happen is that we're going to support you. If the level's not quite right, we're going to get you to the level you need to be. So it's really important to stress it that way, okay? Now, let's get on with this. Let's talk about the big picture consideration in Edexcel GCSE PE. Okay, so we're in a situation here where Edexcel GCSE PE is the second biggest GCSE in the UK. Okay, so that sounds great. Okay, second biggest. It's got 24,000 students, which, sounds positive. It contributes into bucket 3 of Progress 8. If you're not sure what Progress 8 is, it's probably the primary measure that secondary schools use for their self-analysis, and also goes towards performance tables. And of course, here's our GCSE market share. Notice that Edexcel is the biggest in there, at least for GCSE. And also notice that OCR and Edexcel have approximately the same market share, DOE-JC being the compulsory qualification in Wales. There's also a handful of people doing EduCAS and IGCSE, of course. But what we can notice again is that it's really the third biggest course in the UK, because if we take into account BTEC First Award in Sport, which of course is a level 2 qualification as well, that is the single most populous course in the UK. AQA-GCSE comes in second, and then of course we've got our Edexcel in here in its third. Now, talking about the specific exam, we here are focusing on exam 1, okay guys? So we are here, we are focusing on exam 1. And as you see here, exam 1 is 36% of the overall total marks. In fact, it is the single biggest component that we could be working on with our students, the single biggest component. That means that it has the most impact on the student's overall result. Okay, now that doesn't mean that we give it all of the time, it just means that we need to give it enough time. So that's our context. Now, let's get straight into assessment objectives. If assessment objectives is a term to you that's not kind of super familiar at this point, it really should be, okay? Sorry, I'll rephrase that. It's not that it should be now. Make it a familiar term to you and make it something that you become increasingly aware of, okay? So what I want to stress here is that these assessment objectives are uniform across all GCSE PE 9-1 courses with the exception of IGCSE, okay? So if we were to go to WJC or we were to go to Educast or we were to go to AQA, these assessment objectives would be the same. Let's just go through them one at a time. Assessment objective 1, which is the notion of the skill that your students have to show in a sort of an exam or a practical or a coursework environment. They need to show what we call K and U, okay? We can write that down. K and U, okay? Knowledge and understanding. And as you see down here, for our exam 1, this is 42% of the marks on exam 1, on paper 1. That is by far the most significant proportion of marks available are for knowledge and understanding. The second bunch of marks are for AO2, and these are for applying that knowledge. So we can very much think of this as application or applying those skills. But I also want to add a word in here, which we're going to come back to, which is linking this knowledge, okay? Now that particularly is important for the explain command word, which we're going to spend quite a bit of time on with Edexcel, but linking is also considered to be part of applying. You can link one point to another. I'll come back to that point. So that's our AO2. And of course, AO3 is analysing and evaluating, and that's going to feature quite heavily in our extended writing, but also in other questions too. And then finally, AO4 is actually demonstrating skills. Now let's be clear, that one is not in our exam paper. This is practical only. Practical only. I've got quite a lot of glare on my screen here, so I'm actually kind of struggling to see what I'm actually writing. I need some kind of curtain near me to ward this off. Now, the other thing to stress here is that, of course, we can argue that difficulty is going up like that. Okay, so difficulty is going up like that. And the data on these certainly bear that out, which I'm going to talk to you about in quite a bit of detail today. But again, to stress, the biggest proportion of exam 1's marks come from, paper 1's marks come from AO1. We've then got a really significant proportion of application marks, 33%, and then a quarter of our marks are going to come from AO3. So that skill set is crucial. And guys, can I stress to you, therefore, we need to build these skills, okay? Build these skills. And what I want to say here is that I've seen a lot of examples in the sector where these are skills that are purely assessed. They're not necessarily built. And the other thing is they need to be retained. And when I say retained, I'm particularly thinking about AO1. I cannot emphasize to you how many course structures and departments I've worked with in sort of departmental review processes where the retention of information that's been previously learned is absolutely not built into the course. That is a gigantic error and something we'll talk about in numerous points here. So I want to sort of bring some key data to you. We are saying that the paper is worth 90 raw marks. Fine. I mean, it's a lot, but okay, it's way more than OCR. They've got 60, for example, but from memory, I think AQA have 78, so it's comparable. But what is interesting is that students get 105 minutes, so that means they get a very generous amount of time per mark proportion, okay? So they need to achieve less than 1 mark per minute, in this case 0.86. So that's really significant. And this is the least marks per minute of any PE exam, okay, guys? So that means that this is relatively generous, okay? But, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going great, but it's generous in that sense. We get variable marks from multiple choice questions. There were 8 multiple choice questions in 2020, so that's something to be aware of. And then we get variable marks from short answer questions. Now, of course, they're variable because this is variable. If there's more multiple choice, there's fewer short answer and vice versa, right? And then finally, every single paper includes 2 9-mark questions. Now, that is the most, and this is extended writing, okay? So if I can just stress that. This is extended writing, and that is by far the most of any of the major GCSE PE exams. OCR have 1 6-marker, Edexcel have 1 6 and 1 9, so there's your comparison there, okay? Now let's take this further. I mentioned extended writing just now, so let's look at this. The national performance is of deep concern. So we've got, just bear in mind here, we've got both paper 1 and paper 2 examples here, so I wanted to give you a bit of a range. Obviously we're focusing on paper 1, but it's useful here to look at paper 2. Can I stress to you that in 2018, the vast majority of marks on 9-mark questions was not answered well. I'll show you examples of these in a second. In 2019, it was slightly better, but still the vast majority of marks for paper 1 extended writing were not achieved. Now, I'm not taking into account the 2020 summer data because it was the COVID year, and it was basically the resit which was done in the autumn. So I'm not worried about that data. It's not reliable in this context. But this shows us a clear trend. Now, if we were to draw kind of what we might expect, this is what we might expect students to be achieving on average nationally, at national level on extended writing. Now that, you might look at that and go, oh my goodness, this is a massive opportunity for you. And the reason I say that is because if your centre gets this right and your students, let's say, get average marks here, the average mark per student that your students are going to achieve is going to be way higher. So that's something to really, I think, to see as an opportunity, and we'll come back to that at multiple points. Now then, little summaries. Students must answer 2 9-mark questions. Agreed. Performance on paper and extended writing has the potential for a whole grade impact. And let me be clear here, guys. I'm not talking about a grade in the unit. I'm talking about the whole exam grade. You can even argue that the extended writing has the grade impact. Of course, you can say any one raw mark can make a grade impact, right? But there's so many marks available there that people are not picking up on average that it really is quite likely that if we nail that model, it will really make a difference. And secondly, I mean, this is a broad leap, but Edexcel broadly signposts areas where extended writing can be selected from, but teachers should try to develop evaluative and analytical skills throughout the course. Now, what I would say about these areas, that in paper 1, okay, the early stuff, if I just call it the early stuff, I'm talking movement, I'm talking mechanics, I'm talking cardiorespiratory system. There's no current evidence to suggest that there's going to be lots of extended writing lots of extended questions on those areas. Now, that's not to say it won't happen. In Exam Simulator, for example, we do have 9 markers which cover respiratory and cardiovascular system, but they are a stretch to get questions from those areas into that scale. So just be aware of it. Now let's take things further. Your Edexcel exam is also going to incorporate data skills. It absolutely will definitely incorporate data skills. So we're saying every exam paper 1 will have data skills. So here we go. Teachers should see this as a positive, folks. And basically what we're saying here is that your students are doing mathematics since babies, really. They can utilise that performance. Even if they're a weak mathematician, the challenge level here in the P exam is not high in terms of the mathematical skills. And I would really stress this, that we need to be building this into our teaching throughout the course, whether 2 years or 3 years. And the other point we want to make, especially with Edexcel, is that on paper 2, data skills are quite extensive. That comes from like that stuff around sort of participation, and it comes from that stuff on the sort of the graphical data you can present around commercialization and these sorts of things. This is where you're going to see a lot of data skills, but they are in paper 1 as well. So a couple of examples. I think we've got some examples here. So I think I just included one. I think we've got a bunch of examples in your notes, okay? But I just want to show you an example. I'm probably going to bore you here because I haven't actually prepped the answer to this, but I'm just going to show you what a student would need to do this and see what sort of level of mathematical skills. The graphs in 7 and 8 show the runner's depth and rate of breathing at rest and during exercise. Agreed. So I'm noticing this is at rest, I'm noticing this is at exercise. Teachers of this will automatically realise this from the volumes. But the first job, even though I'm analysing data that's graphical, notice here that I'm not taking anything numerical. It's asking me what is label A. And of course in here, I'm going to write in there tidal volume. Okay, so nice and simple. There's my answer. Notice that if I said breathing depth, I'll get no marks for that because it's written on the page. And then here, guys, explain 2 reasons why figure 8 represents the runner's breathing during exercise. So it's basically asking you to look at this and say, in other words, what's changed and why has it changed, okay? So obviously in here, I'm not going to do this whole answer for you, but we could say here that tidal volume, we could have put TV, has increased. And look, what I'm going to do now is bring my mathematical skills in. Now I can see here that we've gone from 0.5 to either side of 0, half a litre, increase from, let's put it as 500 millilitres or 0.5 litres to, and then I'm going to measure from 0 here, 2, and I'm going to put here, because I'll stick with 2, I'll go for 2,000 because I'm keeping my units unified, the 2,000 millilitres, and I'm going to give a reason for this, because, and then I might put down something like the diaphragm is contracting harder, etc., etc. But the point I want to make to you is that, can you notice here that I've got the option to bring the numbers in? It's not forcing me to bring the numbers in, so you need to train your students to do that. Secondly, can you also notice that a lot of what I'm doing here is common sense, and it's also knowledge, okay? So if we look back, okay, yes, this is applied learning, but what we're doing here is we're using common sense to work through a question, and we're using our knowledge and understanding, in this case of lung volumes, to develop this answer, okay? So I really believe that on the data skills, guys, it's about incorporating challenges into your teaching that students can take part in. Secondly, students need to focus on common sense. And one of the things I would really stress to students is just work through the problem, okay? Work through the problem. A great way of expressing it to students is they're basically doing word problems. That's what they're called in maths, right? A lot of the times they're doing word problems, and it's just a common sense work through. They take their time. If they sort of go over it a couple of times, check their reasoning, check their sort of interpretation of data, they're going to be good. But what I would stress as well is where the opportunity arises, incorporate numbers into the answer. Now I've got to change my canvas, so just give me a moment and I'll do that straight away. Now let us move on straight away to sort of like some really sort of structured stuff here. I want to be clear, I'm arguing that your teaching of paper 1 should take, well, as you see here, plus or minus 3 lessons. So we are saying here it's going to take you from 37 to 43 lessons, okay? So let's call it 20 weeks. Now the reason I'm saying 20 weeks is that we strongly believe that you should be teaching 2 lessons per week on theory. I'm making an assumption here you're not teaching paper 1 and paper 2 side by side. That might be the wrong assumption, but I'm going to make that assumption here a second. And the other thing I'm going to stress is 2 lessons, 2 hours-ish a week of lessons. And also there should be 1 hour robust, high-impact homework. Again, the number of departments I review and I work with, and the impact of homework is very unintentional or delicate. Now that should not be the case. Impact through homework makes a specific and strategic difference to your cohort's output, okay? So make absolutely clear. But guys, here's the shocking bit. I am arguing that if you've got 2 lessons a week, there should be none of them which are practical lessons, okay? Now, I know that's going to cause a gasp in many people. I'm going to put an asterisk by this. Can I be clear? When I talk about practical lessons, I'm talking about a block of badminton, block of said sport, okay? Block of athletics, block of tennis. I'm arguing you shouldn't be doing that in your GCSE PE curriculum time, okay? I strongly argue that this comes out of there, and what you replace practical with is 2 things. It's theory-based practical, and what I mean, and what would be a great example of that? It would be things like doing a heart rate responses practical, say, which is going to be really helpful to us. Or it's going to be something like we're going to do a practical around the use of levers, say. And then what the other thing we're going to bring in is we are going to use extracurricular sport to be our development and assessment model. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have an assessment week in halfway through year 11. I'm sure loads of schools do that. But guys, this traditional model where we do a 6-week block of badminton, a 6-week block of tennis, 6 weeks block of athletics, 6-week block of netball, it does not develop the students in the skills that they need to perform. In other words, those assessment objectives. So I'm strongly recommending that. Now, the second point, of course, is I've provided you this course structure. And I want to be clear, guys, this is from 2021 to 2022. These dates are real dates. They are really the weeks in that year. And this is what I'm arguing that at least that you could consider. Now, I want to introduce you to an idea. If I take a 2-week block of that structure, notice what I've got here. I have clearly identified skills that I want to develop in the students, in this case identifying, describing and illustrating. You'll see why in a second. And I've clearly identified content, which is functions, classifications and structure of the skeleton. And at the end of that, I'm going to do some kind of checkpoint. Now, those of you that know our work will know the word checkpoint as a website structure. I'm not talking about that here. A checkpoint, if I can just say a checkpoint, equals some kind of data extraction. Call it a core assessment. Call it a mini test. Call it a mini exam. Call it whatever you want to do. But that has to be sort of brought out within that time frame. I'm talking 2 weeks max. So see here, intro, lesson, and at the second half probably of the fourth lesson, we're going to be measuring this, okay? And of course, we're going to do it diagnostically. It's also diagnostic. Now, any of you that know our work, and you're about to if you don't, that is so straightforward to do and so possible to do in 2021 that there's really the question we've got to ask is why wouldn't you do that, okay? Secondly, guys, if we're here, say, and we're doing, oops, I shouldn't put that line in there. If we're in this block here, and we're doing our sixth block here, and we're doing sort of respiratory systems and stuff, it does not mean that when we come to our checkpoint, let's say we've got a little mini exam, it does not mean that we don't do content from here as well. Of course we will. Just like when we do this stuff here, and we do this little sort of diagnostic here, we will definitely incorporate this, and this and this into that piece of writing probably or drawing, okay? So we are going to keep sending the students back as well many times. And guys, finally on this, can I really stress to you, and I'm sure there's more questions on this because it's a very detailed structure. Can I stress to you a couple of points here? First of all, notice that I'm building theoretical practicals into the course. You can do more, no problem. I'm just giving you indications of where there might be obvious energy, for example, release of energy aerobically and anaerobically. Of course, that lends itself to a practical. But let's knacker them out, basically. But the other thing I want to stress here, guys, is that we must incorporate, well, we could call it retrieval practice, but we must incorporate quizzing. If you want your course to be effective and students to retain knowledge over time, quizzing's crucial. Now, we are damn lucky that we've got the work of Ebbinghaus, Thalheimer, Rosenshine to literally show us the impact of low stakes and high stakes retrieval practice. Let's just call it quizzing for want of a better term. That retains knowledge over time so that when we come to, say, build our levers knowledge, it is built on firm foundations because we have quizzed that over time. Now, only a couple of other things, guys. Obviously, you see we get to paper 2 round about the end of March, April time there. But can I also stress to you really importantly, that we've also got at the end of year 10, we've also got kind of this diagnostic summer study prep. You should know at the end of year 10 where your students are strong and weak. Now, guys, I am strongly urging this consideration. In fact, I think I've got it in the summary here. Students should be studying 2 lessons a week. Let's do it this way. Students doing 2 lessons a week. That's my argument. Students should be doing at least 60 minutes of high impact homework a week. If we don't do that, we are missing an opportunity. And also, it's hard for us to get sort of like an equal shake of the stick in curriculum time, but in homework, it's equal, okay? So get PE up the ladder rungs and get it prioritized for your students. Now, when I talk about high impact, I think the opposite of this is do a poster, make me a PowerPoint slide. I'm not interested in that, okay? Now, I'm not saying it's always bad. I'm just saying it's not high impact. What I'm interested in is things like very robust mastery quizzing. I'm doing exam practice answering with support. I'm making wonderful notes and a magnificent piece of teaching. Okay, these are high impact homeworks. Now, those of you that know our work in detail will know why we do our work the way we do. Now, I've put asterisks here because you may be an NQT, you may be fresh into the school, you might not have control of those systems, but you can at least discuss them with people. So we're also saying, in order for our students to develop AO2, we must say how and why things happen. That's really important because unless we say how and why, the students can't evaluate and analyse either. So we must teach for those skills. Secondly, fourthly, actually, skills must be developed through our theories. They've seen that in the course structure. We've got to include data skills. And the other thing is that we can't build AO2 without good knowledge. Now, the key to good knowledge is obviously teaching it well and learning it well, but maintaining it over time. The key to that is quizzing. Now, I could add the word interleaving into this if you want, interleaving old and new learning together. But we absolutely must maintain knowledge over time. How many times have I had a student who has come to me or I've done something with them and they've forgotten the concept of the scapula because we learned it in September in year 9 or year 10 or whatever. You've got to keep that alive. Now, I'm going to take a pause there and consider that the end of section 1, and we'll be straight back. Well, we'll do Q&A, and then we'll be back with section 2. Okay, I like that little zooming thing. It's quite cool. Anyway, hope that was useful. Half time, as it were. Questions. I know Marta sent me one this way because it's just blipped through, and I think it's from Elio. If that's the Elio, I think it is. Hi, Elio. How you doing, mate? So the question was: our students start their GCSEs in year. This is on Zoom, by the way, for anyone who's on the Vimeo feed. Our students start their GCSEs in year 9 and only have an hour a week of theory and 2 hours practical. Given we have an extra year with them, what changes would you recommend? Okay, so I'm assuming in there, Elio, that you've got 1 hour a week in terms of the GCSE course and 2 core PE. My business here is not to touch the core PE. That to me is it's sacrosanct. We don't touch that. That's really important. They have that practical. They have that physical experience at school. That is not my argument. I would be devastated if someone interpreted what I'm saying in that way. I think with regard to the 1 hour a week over 3 years of your GCSE PE, there's 2 routes to take here. Okay, one is probably fruitless, which is, give it a go. Why not? One is to go and keep arguing that point over and over again that the better model is for 2 years, 2 hours a week. Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to make any difference, but that really is, in my opinion and my experience, the optimal way to do it. There has been a drift towards 3-year GCSEs. I think we all recognise that. There'll be a lot of people in this call who do 3-year GCSEs. I don't see the argument for that, but some people do, so I'm just going to give my opinion. Assuming you are doing 1 lesson a week for 3 years, my view on that one would be that retention and retrieval practice is by far the critical behaviour. We have to accept that they're going to sit an exam in May of, let's say, 2024, that they first learn things on skeletal stuff probably in September of, when would that be, 2021? No, 2022, whatever the year 9 time of that is. Therefore, the quizzing and retention utilisation is the critical behaviour there. Now again, that's why I put those asterisks. Some things might not be in your control, but that is something that I would urge you. I am also making an assumption that in this call we've got people who are going to be the policy makers at some point in the future, and I'm really speaking to that person at that part of their career as well. So if you'll allow me to answer it that way, then I hope that's reasonable. I've just got to check whether I've got any questions coming in from Vimeo. So while I am looking at my phone while I'm talking about you, there is a very good reason I'm just checking in to make sure. Nothing from Mark whatsoever. No, I didn't want to. That's from Vimeo, by the way. We're streaming both directions, Vimeo and Zoom. Now, a couple of things I did want to say about the course structure in addition to what I said to Elliot there. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of that diagnostic and data extraction. I do it in 2-week blocks, but of course it depends if you've got 1 or 2 lessons a week. Now, personally for me, that is the way that I believe is the fundamental process of knowing that your students are making the required progress as they go through. It also isn't just a matter of measuring them in that moment. It's also a matter of diagnostically bringing out that which they are weaker on and then being able to affect that. The other point I would make is that I've talked a lot about quizzing, retrieval practice, taking them back to previous learning. Please build into your qualifications the capacity to interleave new and old learning together. Now, lots of people will be doing this because they've read Ebbinghaus and Thalheimer and Rosenstein, but I cannot emphasize this strongly enough. If we do the following: teach, move on, 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 they are going to forget that which we did at the start of the course. That is built into the structure. It's human nature. It's human cognitive science. That is the reality of the situation. So therefore, we have to build in that interleaving of old and new learning. And again, some of you are going to see this in the weeks to come, but those of you that work with us, you understand, I think, probably how we believe that you could be doing that, maybe even how you should be doing that. So I'll leave those points there. I don't think we have any more questions. You're very welcome to fire them in. If anyone's feeling brave to put something in the chat, do be encouraged. Very open to the questions. I personally take it as a sign of kind of feedback and success. What I am going to do before we go, I'm just going to do a little bit of a shout out here. Mark Stacey in the call, Sam Ingram, we've got Eleanor White in it, Ellie, who I've mentioned already, and Sarah Clark, to name but a few guys. So just naming a few names in there, just as a nice social thing, and shows we're live. Good stuff. Okay, let's get back into it to part 2. And this should be equivalent sort of length, probably a touch shorter. Let's see how we go. Just allow me to switch the feed, and this should be back to you imminently. This is always the testy bit. Okay, I think we're good. So we're in the home straight here, okay, guys. And what we've tried to do here, try and get my words out, is to analyse a full paper to give you the best diagnostics of what the paper looks like possible. Again, remember, this is Fitness and Body Systems Paper 1, Edexcel GCSE PE. This paper was set to be sat on 13th of May 2020. It wasn't sat then. Of course, it was used as effectively a mop-up or a resit for anyone that wasn't happy with their centre assessed grades last year under COVID. But of course, what we want to do here is analyse this most recent paper. So here's a couple of really intriguing things for you to be aware of. First things first, if you have a look at our mark breakdown, by far the most marks in Edexcel papers come from 1 and 2 markers, okay? Actually, almost 60% of marks come from 1 and 2 markers. Now, that does not mean they're all A01, K and U. What that means is a majority will be, because of course we've got, what was it, 45%, I think it's got to be. Check that number, it might be 46, can't remember. But what we can say for sure is that if our students have snappy recall knowledge that can be applied, they're going to do well on this work, okay? So identifying, stating, giving, defining, completing, multiple choice, this kind of thing is going to do well for us. And of course, as we sort of move around here, we're getting into describing, explaining, potentially other skills like justifying and so on, but we are getting in there. We can also say that we've got a batch of marks here from 3 and 4 markers, which is really significant. 3 and 4 markers probably going to be things like describes and explains, but 3 and 4 markers can come from things like give 3 of something, okay? So they're very good. Don't misunderstand these 3 and 4 markers for necessarily being or AO2s, or say they're not. I mean, they're very often AO1. And then, of course, we get 18 marks coming from that extended writing, 2 lots of 9 markers. So we have a very, very clear structure in terms of the exam requirements. Now, what I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm now going to take you down to the skills required, or the command terms. Now, notice again, if I was to take, I don't know why we didn't do it this way actually, but if I was to take this block here, let me do it in a different colour, this block here, and I was to take this block here, we should have really put these together next to each other. These skills here are really kind of what you might think about those snappy, quick responses in an exam. You know, multiple choice, identifying, naming, giving, describing something, which is usually a fairly simple skill. And then we've got things like here, completing. Now, completing, guys, often comes in the form of some kind of table, or it could even be completing a phrase or putting a word into a sentence. Now, that is way over. In fact, it is almost exactly half of the paper. After that, we've got another bunch of marks, which is for explaining, and then our higher command skills over here, okay? So we've got our explaining, our analysing, our evaluating, our justifying. So you can almost split the paper in half and say, right, there's these kind of quick, snappy commands that we need to do. There are exceptions. There are questions that break this rule, in inverted commas, okay? But we can clearly see that these are the skills. And of course, if we practice them, if we build them into our core structure, that's going to be powerful. Next point is that if we analyse 2020 paper, we can see that the significant majority of marks, 56 out of that 90, well, you can see it there, 62.2%, they come from applied reasoning, okay, guys? We're taking our knowledge, say, could be evaluation and analysis, of course, but we're taking that knowledge and we are applying it to a practical performance. So, guys, unless we are teaching through and via practical, and I'm not saying it has to be practical in that moment, but if we are not teaching, let's say, a third class lever by talking about a bicep curl or by talking about a huck punch in boxing, then of course we're going to just teach it as kind of rote learning. Third class levers have the effort in the middle, it becomes robotic. We've got to teach it through practical, and that's how it's questioned as well. And final thing from me, I've actually got 2 before we switch canvases. If we look here, the nature of those practicals are not just football and rugby. Yes, it's true we have a little bit of football in 2020, but notice that 110 metre hurdles is way more. Marathon running, lots of questions on aerobic stuff, way more. Basketball's probably in the hitting zone for a lot of students, but is high jump, is gymnastics, is high diving. Now, unless we are teaching through these practical examples, we cannot assume that students are engaged with these or understand them. Really now, how many students in our classes understand 110 metre hurdling? And how many people would tell us that's a male discipline? By the way, obviously, I'm saying this in 2020, this may well change in the future, but in 2020, 110 metre hurdles is a male discipline. How many of our students know that? No, I'm not saying that affects the mark necessarily, but if they don't know that, they probably don't know that the lead leg shows hip flexion. Okay, so therefore we've got to teach through these examples whenever we can. And guys, finally, just to show you the proportion on paper 1 in 2020, our data skills came from here. So the significant minority of questions incorporate data skills. Now, that doesn't mean we don't teach it. We definitely do teach it, but we just need to be aware of it. Right, I need a quick canvas change and I'll be straight back to you. There we go. So let's just summarize that which we've just talked about. We are saying we must explain concepts to students. Okay, this is really important, guys. We must be able to explain things to students and expect them to be able to explain them back to us. So explaining. We must develop this in students. Secondly, okay, we've got subject knowledge is fundamentally important, as we've just seen from that distribution of particularly 1 and 2 markers, particularly those sort of direct, snappy command terms, multiple choice, give, state, complete. Majority of questions linked to performances, therefore we've got to teach through that. As I said, we must use our practical examples, which are varied, but probably stick to the activity spec list. Now, I'm not saying Edexcel will never ask off the spec list. Maybe they will ask about archery, I don't know. But we should be teaching through the spec list activities, okay? If you're not sure what I mean by that, there's set activities that the kids can be assessed in. We should be teaching through the fullest range of those. Now, I can't remember what the most sort of exotic sport, I seem to remember camogie is on there. Check that, because I'm not 100% sure. But then there's things like rounders that are not on there. So, you want to be thinking clearly, is I want to teach through judo. Is judo on there? I think it is. I want to teach through MMA. Is MMA on there? No. Okay, so think through those things. And of course, we're talking about exam skill, command word interpretation is really important, and we must develop it as I showed you in that course structure. And we're going to do loads of examples of that, by the way, guys. Now, talking about command words, something we've prepared for you, and this is our own development. Now, can I be clear here? The description of these command terms is absolutely direct from Edexcel. We've lifted them, basically. But can I also stress to you that if you have a sort of a look at this bunch of... Whoops, not sure why that's... not coming out for me. This bunch of skills here, I'll go halfway down to describe. These are really AO1-ish. Okay. Now, of course, there's some examples of AO2 here because we might be asked to identify an example. We'd even include sort of that AO1-ness in complete as well. Now, we've then got a bunch of skills that kind of AO2-ish. And I'm going to draw them from kind of here. We've then got the idea of justifying, which is absolutely solidly AO3, which is in there. And then we've got our extended or potential extended writing commands down here, where these are absolutely AO3 relevant down here. But notice for our extended writing, we don't just get marks for AO3. In every piece of extended writing, we also get AO2. We also get AO1. Now, that happens to be a discuss and evaluate, two of the really common ones. But those questions contain all 3 skills, okay? So really, really important. Now, I strongly recommend that you read through. There's no point me reading those out to you, but I strongly recommend that you look at the meaning of each of those terms and build those skills into your teaching. Here's a great example of my students thinking evaluatively, okay? So they've got to form a judgment. They've got to think about strengths and weaknesses. So I teach something to them, and a student puts their hand up and says, "Sir, is there any other side to this? Is there any negatives to it? What's the weakness to that system, that thing, that concept?" Now, you might be thinking, well, my students never ask that question. Well, why? Why don't they ask that question? Why are they not thinking evaluatively? Why am I not teaching them about, let's say, third-class levers? And they go to me, "Sir, what's the body's filled with them. What's the negative about these third classes? Tell what's bad or what's strong about them? What's the other side of this? How should I think about this?" They're thinking about concluding it, right? Those are examples. Now, again, we need to be building that in. So students must be taught writing skills. I cannot stress this enough. Remember, the bandwidth by which your student completes their assessment is writing things on a bit of paper or drawing. Well, obviously, the performance is there as well. And they must do this through the course. Recognise the common skills. We've just talked about those. But complete's a great example, by the way. But obviously, there's less frequent ones as well that they need to be aware of. The other thing I say is that command terms demystifies the challenge of exams. Once you know the distinction between describe and explain, it demystifies it. It becomes simple, obvious. I can practice it over time. And if we don't do that, beautiful thought experiment. Go to your students, possibly even your teaching team, and say to me categorically, what's the difference between describe and explain? Ask people that question. See what they give you back. And I would argue that the answer will not always be a robust one. Now, we are now going to talk about extended writing. Okay, so again, an area of concern on Edexcel and also an area of challenge. Just stress this point, AO1, 3 marks, AO2, 3 marks, AO3, 3 marks. Every 9 marker is structured that way. We've already looked at the national performance here, so we know that there is a national underperformance. I'm going to write that in case anyone has not seen the gravity of this. National underperformance. Now, don't panic. This is not overly different with AQA. In fact, AQA's numbers are highly comparable to these. Where there's a slightly stronger model is with OCR. Now, I would argue, because what you find with OCR is that the average marks are roughly the same. The difference from them is they're getting about 3, but it's out of 6, so they're getting about half the marks, which if you look across raw mark distribution across the whole of PE papers is roughly what you might expect it to be. But we've got national underperformance. Now, I've just got to sort of scoot down here. What we are saying to you is that we believe that your command terms are going to work like this. In most cases, your students are going to get evaluate or examine. Okay, now we're treating those roughly as the same thing. They're going to get evaluate, examine. We've had 5 lots of 9 markers. This is across paper 1 and paper 2, by the way, that have been these commands. And we've had 1 that's a discuss command. But we are also raising the possibility for you that you could get an analyze, of course, because it's evaluate and analyze. And don't neglect justifying, because justifying is an AO3 skill, so potentially could be built in here. Now, what I would stress to you here is the model that I'm showing you. This is called the roadmap. Okay, and it is a completely free resource which you can get in touch with us about here, and you can download completely freely, and it completely demystifies exam writing with these commands. I mean, even to the fact it gives the kids the key language to use in their answer, obviously other than the content. It tells us if we are doing an analyze answer that this is probably the key language we're going to be using, and so on and so on and so on. So if you're interested in that, I could do a whole 6-week block of training on that one in itself, but bear in mind that's there and you can develop that with them. Now, where I want to get to with this is just say the following things. With extended writing, your students are definitely going to be writing about a practical example. They pretty much always, in fact, I think it always gives you a person or an athlete. You know, they give you Jim or Hillary or whoever, and the students have got to write about the context of that particular performance. So that's what they're going to do. Now, we'd also say here that data skills have not yet, there's no current examples of data skills in 9-mark answering, but why can't that happen in the future? So developing those data skills is important for you. And I actually bounced this off a couple of people at Edexcel. Is it possible that data skills could be incorporated into 9-marker? And their answer to me was, it's possible. Okay, they didn't give me, yes, definitely. They gave me, it's possible. You shouldn't rule it out. Now, we are going to look now at the structure and the marking of our 9 markers. Okay, so we are saying there are 3 parameters: indicative, guidance, descriptors. Okay, so look, I've just given an example of a 9-mark question here. This is straight from Exam Simulator. I'll just put ES on the side, our in-house exam software. Okay, and we're saying for paper 1 9-marker, changes to respiratory system. Now, I actually mentioned this question earlier on. This is, I think, the only question in existence that gives the students an opportunity to write about respiratory system in a 9-mark structure, because Edexcel haven't done that, right? So here, Lauren, so there's our character, Lauren. She plays for a professional football club. Good for you. During a match, her respiratory system responds to allow her to work at different intensities. Agreed. Command term. Evaluate the different changes that occur in the respiratory system during a match that will impact Lauren's performance. So again, you see the AO2 here, the impact performance. Of course, some of them are going to be positive and some of them are going to be negative. Okay, so we can get then the evaluation into that. So we can expect a question of that kind of model. Now I'm going to go into the next 3. I just need to show you, I just need to change my canvas. Give me a moment, please. Okay, we look good. So, as I mentioned before, 3 components. Obviously, we've got the question itself. Let's consider that as read. But we've also now got the indicative content. So we've labelled it as marking points here, but this is IC. This is indicative content, okay? Now, what we've got here is a whole bunch of content which would be considered the correct answer to that question. And I just want to sort of stress to you that here to here, This is AO1 content, all right? So we've got a series of AO1 piece of knowledge here. We've got diaphragm contracting more forcefully, more oxygen needs. So this is the change in that respiratory system. We've then got a bunch of stuff here down to, where am I? Here down to here, where this is AO2 type application. Have a look at those points, that's application. We've then got a bunch of points, I'm not sure I've chosen the right colour here, but down to here, which are AO3. They're effectively positive or negative applications of those ideas. And that is how the indicative content is going to be structured for Edexcel. Now, if you officially talk to someone at Edexcel, they're going to tell you, as we'll look at the levels in a second, that the students are marked out of 9 marks, but their answer across this range of material is kind of judged as a whole. I'm really sorry, but in every example we've seen, if the student gets 1, 1, 1, and then gets 1, 1, 1, and then gets 1, 1, 1, so they pick these marks up, they get 9. Now, no one from Edexcel is going to admit that to you, but that is how they've made the examining of this easy. If the student picks up 9 of those points, they get 9 marks. Now, can I say that is off the record? If you ask Edexcel, they're not going to acknowledge that, but that is the reality. Okay? Now, let's go down here. We've also got guidance. Our guidance is really just saying how to go about sort of marking the question. And it's just straight saying what AO1, AO2 and AO3 is really, guys. So just have a look at that kind of guidance. But where we really want to get to is that Edexcel are going to provide us level descriptors. Now, level descriptors, of course, we want our students to be moving down to this range of marks. Ideally, that's certainly what's happening on average nationally. But if we go down to that top mark, we've got accurate K and U. Great. Notice technical language. Great. We know that's what we've been building in our course. Applied detailed knowledge to question context. So we've been building application through our course. And then we've got reaches valid and well-reasoned conclusions supported by relevant evidence. So if they evaluate and reach a conclusion, we've been building that in our course. So if we build those skills, those things are going to come out of our students. So that is the extended writing challenge. Now, to finish off with today, there's 2 ways that your students can go about writing. There's loads of ways, but there's 2 specific ways your students can go about writing about extended writing. So, can I be clear here? James's preferred method. I don't know what I've written. I can't even write my name properly. Hang on. James's preferred method is this one, but most teachers do this one. And really the awareness of both is the important thing here. Now, what does this mean? I believe in a blended approach. Again, I am the minority. You don't have to go with me. Build your own model, no problem, but I'm making you aware. So I believe that this paragraph here should incorporate AO1, 2, 3, because I don't see how the student, let's say, writes this and then doesn't naturally go on to write about this and then naturally go on to write about this. I think that comes together, okay? So I think it should be blended, all 3 assessment objectives in one paragraph, then paragraph 2, then paragraph 3, then we reach a conclusion in paragraph 4. Now, many teachers have decided this is, in air quotes, too hard, okay? It isn't, but lots of people have decided that. So they tried to simplify it, and what lots of centres do, in fact almost all I would say, is they encourage the students to do all of their AO1 writing in paragraph 1, all of their AO2 writing in paragraph 2, and all of their AO3 writing in paragraph 3. Okay, fine. That is a way, and then of course you do your conclusion. That is a way to do it, and okay, you can say it's very quick and easy to introduce to the students as long as they understand what AO1, 2, 3 are. But I would argue, look, how do you make an evaluative point without repeating this? It's hard, I don't understand that. So I'm getting a bit controversial here, I'll stop. Right, key takeaways to finish off with, guys. Extended writing is the most challenging skill on the course. Now look, someone can say to me, well, James, getting full marks on badminton is more difficult. Okay, I take your point. I'm talking about in the exam performance, this is definitely the most challenging thing, and nationally is where the fewest marks are picked up. That gives us a huge opportunity to mark our centre out as higher performing because our students buck the trend. Good. Extended writing must be built into teaching. We must teach it, we must practice it, and we must use it in assessment. And this should be done as early as possible, okay, guys? Absolutely essential that we do that. Students can only write well if they have a very sound K and U, knowledge and understanding, okay? And they must develop vocab. if they're going to apply these to performances. So knowledge and understanding kept alive over time, subject vocabulary being built often through our quizzing or retrieval practice. Teachers must use either a blended or a chunked approach. I feel now like I was too firm before and controversial and too strong on the blended approach. Probably you'll go with the chunked approach, probably. But my argument is I've found that to be a very, very unnatural way for people to write things down. Your call. And guys, if the centre is able to improve extended writing, which we're going to do loads of in week 2 to 6, you're going to see your whole centre's marks go up considerably. So that's where we are, guys. There are points. I'm just checking I haven't missed anything below. It's a classic, and you've got one slide left. That's where we are. Let's go back for some Q&A. Cheers. Well. Twice in one show. There you go. I've been told off. I've been told off that I said 2020 and it's 2021 in the middle of that. And it is 2021, that's correct, although it is kind of easy to forget 2021, isn't it, so far? Maybe that's going to change. So let's have your questions, folks. I've got a couple of things I want to say, but if there's questions on Vimeo, Mark's going to bring them to me. If there's questions on Zoom, I've already been sort of pointing in the direction of those, so I'm going to pick up straight away on Elio's comment here. Elio on Zoom says to us, can the students pick up any marks when completing a conclusion? If not, is it necessary? Yes, they can pick up marks by reaching a conclusion, because that conclusion is a recognised feature of the structure in each of those level descriptors. Now, what I would personally argue that's going to happen with the conclusion is two things, okay? Well, by the way, we're going to practice this over the course of the actual course itself. But I would argue the following things. So, first of all, let's say that they're going to get between 7. We've decided they're going into the top band. The conclusion and the quality of it is going to be the discriminator from the top to the bottom of that band. So it might be the difference between them getting 7 or 8 or 9. That's the first thing. The second thing about the conclusion is I strongly argue that the student should not be repeating and summarising that which they've written in the answer. That is not what the conclusion is for. The conclusion is to draw the evidence together and make an opinionated or informed judgment. Okay, so as an example, we don't write about, let's say, agility train. Let's say we don't write about agility testing and agility training, and then they conclude, say, oh, the points I've made so far are, and then say the same things. What we would say there is, it's my experience in my training in netball that agility training is overemphasized, and actually what needs to be incorporated alongside agility training is development of coordination and flexibility, which go hand in hand with agility because that's what we want the student to do in that environment. So we want them to make an informed judgment. I often think it's a further application in the conclusion. It's also, what's my experience of this thing? And these guys do sport in the main. I know there's exceptions, but these guys are at clubs, they're doing things. Can they bring that question structure back to that point? And that's what I'd argue they need to do. But yes, it's definitely worth marks. And I think the key thing is probably going to discriminate the top and the bottom of a level for them, whichever level they happen to be in. That would be my point. Now, again, I'm going to check my phone because I'm just going to check Mark is not firing me any Vimeo questions over. I managed to put my key entry incorrectly, and I don't think there are from there. So really, final points from me. Oh, here we go. I have got a question here. Literally, here we go. So this, I've got to try and make this large. So this is from a colleague, Warren Adams. Hi, James. In a 9-mark extended mark question, if the 3 paragraphs for A1, 2, 3 are present, is a conclusion necessary, or should this be as an opportunity to pick up the loose marks that you may have missed? I think what I said to Elio there probably answers that a little bit, Warren, but yes, definitely a conclusion necessary, and the conclusion is named in the descriptors, so therefore the student wants to tick that box. So I would strongly recommend they do that, and I'll just repeat that point again. It could be the bits they haven't included, but my question would be, well, why haven't they included that? They should have included that. The conclusion should bring it together and form that opinion that the student believes, or in the student's experience. I can't tell you how many times in a concluding essay students of mine have gone to something like, this would be good to use in a warm-up. Warm-ups have been underdeveloped in my experience, and or they might say something like, this training's important, but this other thing's important too, and they can work in combination. In my experience in horse riding or football or whatever it is that it's not done that way. So that's where I would argue that the conclusion should go, and building on Elio's point, I would argue as well that it is worth marks. Now, final things from me, guys. We are going to get you out of here by 5:30 BST, in case you're not in the UK, no matter what. But can I remind you that on the hub page, you have the downloadable notes, the downloadable editable notes. You have the recording of this show as well, which is on there in case you want to catch up with anything or go back or share it or whatever it happens to be. But also, guys, you have the application to certify the course. And Mark has just sent me something really interesting. We've had 20 additional applications to do the certification. I don't know if that makes us full at this point, but can I urge you that if you're considering certification with us, you need to apply as nowish as you possibly can. It is not pleasant disappointing people from our perspective, but we are going to do it, because what I'm not going to do is take 180 people on to accredit them and then them get basically a watered down version of our service. If they're coming on board with us, we're going to give them the right quality, therefore we're going to limit those numbers. So that's the reason we're done. And the other thing is, we didn't want to make it compulsory for people, of course, because the course is effectively free. So I hope that makes sense. You've got a choice. That's the point I would make. You don't have to do it. Hopefully see the course is going to be good quality. But if you do want to do it, and you do, I cannot stress this enough. If you are looking for that next post, or if you're the person appointing for posts and this qualification comes along for you, I really hope that it's a valuable thing. I believe it will be. I think that's all from me. I'm going to wish everyone a 5:30 finish. I'm going to wish everyone a wonderful evening. It is sunny here. I can see blue sky. I don't know what I've got a date with this evening. It's going to be at least a substantial dinner. I might go and sit in a jacuzzi later on if I go down to the gym. May even treat myself to a little bike ride, then jacuzzi. Crazy days on a Tuesday night. I can even do spin classes these days. Wow. Haven't been in the pub yet. So you never know. Guys, I love doing this. It's a privilege to talk to you. Thank you so much for your attention and staying with us. The retention stats are brilliant. Have a great evening. Thanks, guys.
Personal, I ain't lying, I ain't hiding, I've been grinding, multiplying. I've been trying to get my weight up, staying prayed up, meditating and taking time away.